I first came across your work way before I met you, and it kind of came out of nowhere in that you were making big things really quickly and things that really had a massive buzz online and seemed to, it wasn't really clear to me who you were, where you were from, what it was all about, and you were just there all of a sudden. How did that feel like to you? Because there was so much buzz going on at, you know, the early 2000s of people just pushing out their own way.
Yeah. No, it was certainly interesting. It accelerated pretty quickly from when we started the studio, or when I started it. You know, it was just me on my own at first, but yeah, I think it was partially down to timing, in the sense that it was 2004 and it was being very prolific in terms of making work with these newfound digital tools. But the timing came along with faster broadband, faster internet, essentially, where we could get videos uploaded quickly and get stuff out there. And the kind of creative, digital, artistic culture online was before Facebook, before Instagram, before kind of social media, really. It was all about kind of news groups and forums. And I think YouTube was just starting and Vimeo was just starting, things like that. But suddenly things were able to go viral in a kind of chat room context rather than a social context. So that's how things started to spread. And it meant that our work could reach people at any corner of the world. And it also meant we could work with people from any corner of the world suddenly. So I started the studio just at the right time, I think, 2004.
And do you know, we're going to be interviewing people who've been commissioners of your work or partners with you over the years. And I'm sort of, I know that MTV commission was a big deal. How did they find you? Like, how did people find you at the time? Because it's not like you had a gallerist. It's not like you've had an agent or a manager.
Yeah. I think essentially we'd done quite a lot of press in kind of graphic design press, which is kind of my background, and then more into the kind of motion graphics press that was coming out, you know, and there was DVD reels coming out like Gas in Japan and 1.0 in the UK and Stash in the US, where it was kind of that whole growing motion graphics community was starting to get out there. And MTV came along, where the creative directors in Milan kind of presented back to us our work and said, we think you join the dots between all these things because you've been doing audio reactive animation where it's responding to music. You've been doing like crazy typography and branding and graphic design, and you've been doing these new kind of like motion pieces as well. And it was kind of, it ticked all the things they needed to kind of completely shake up MTV worldwide. So, you know, that was a perfect collision of kind of graphic design and branding, strategic thinking versus the kind of crazy artistic output all in one. So super consumerist package, really.
Also, though, I think I want to give credit to like what 1.0 did, because as a sort of global voice very quickly, Shane and the 1.0 crew quickly built a festival network that connected really well with Japan and many, many countries that, like you said, those DVD reels combined with the festivals gave a lot of artists like yourselves reach. And I just, do you feel connected to, because I know you lived in Sheffield and you still do, did you feel connected to people in London during that time and people that you didn't necessarily work with, but you saw as your peers? Who were they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I guess there was a few studios I was very inspired by. There was High Res that were like the pioneers of the kind of Flash website scene and sort of early Shoreditch residents, I guess. I used to go to the Blue Note Club all the nights there in Hoxton Square. So I was down in London a lot, you know, getting the train back and forth because it's only 2 hours away. So I'd say like 1.0, High Res. There was a motion studio called Precursor that became Man vs. Machine. Yeah, loads of amazing studios. And then I sort of started working with a journalist, designer, founder of a studio called Intro, called Adrian Shaughnessy, who ended up writing our book for us as well. And he helped me out a lot in the beginning, where we were working with his studio and his team called This Is Real Art, who were kind of helping to manage some of the bigger projects we were getting that I could have no way of cope with on my own. And I learned an awful lot from them.
I wanted to sort of think about some of the other practitioners around that time from London that were all kind of ended up being in that Decode exhibition and that Shane curated at the V&A with Louise Shannon. And, at the time there was also that really major sort of live cinema happening with Defuse and the Light Surgeons and a bunch of people internationally. United Visual Artists just started up. So it was, and I think one of the things that you all had in common was one way or another a really deep relationship to music or rave culture, and in your case, skateboarding as well. Is there a first sort of musician that you started to work with?
Well, I would obviously say my brother.
Well, yeah.
Me and him grew up, and he was figuring out how to make music on a ZX Spectrum and stuff in like the early 90s, and I was there trying to figure out how to make graphic design. But I'd say the first influence massively for me was Aphex Twin Selected Ambient Works 1 album, which I listened to on my CD Discman on the way to art school every single day. So that was a total sort of punk bedroom DIY, build your own synthesizer, kind of making his own illegal raves in Cornwall type of thing. Yeah. And that led me on to the first artificial intelligence compilation on Warp Records, which was like the first kind of, they used to call it intelligent dance music, like electronica. And I think the main two were three absolute, still my favorite is Aphex Twin, The Black Dog, which are now kind of Plaid, and Orteka.
Yeah.
So we kind of grew up with all of that, and I moved to Sheffield, and I was living with Orteka for a while, and we were meeting with Aphex and people like that. But they were the biggest influence, and that's what inspired us. And I don't know if I've even mentioned that the reason I'm in Sheffield is I work for Designers Republic, a massively influential like music design studio.
Yeah.
Went in London, and I studied graphic design in London. I was doing record sleeves for my brother and flyers and stuff like that in London, and I got a job in Sheffield. And the only reason I moved to Sheffield really was Warp Records and the Designers Republic. It was all, like you say, it was all because of the music culture. And I was there for 8 years and learned a million things there, and before I started on my own.
Yeah, I don't think you can replace what you learn in those first few years where you're part of something that's moving fast and changing things. And it's only then you sort of start to go, oh, I need to be out on my own now.
Yeah, exactly. I think what happened was, it was amazing working at Designers Republic because we were just so prolific and people were copying our work so much, the sleeves we were releasing and the posters and the exhibitions we were doing, that it kept us evolving. We were like, oh, these other studios are, things are becoming cliche now. Let's reinvent ourselves. So it was such a motivating kind of dynamic between us and the audience. But yeah, after 8 years, no matter how hard I tried to escape what people were coming for us for, like a house style, it was very much like, yeah, we kind of like this, but can it be more like the classic Designers Republic type?
Yeah.
So, and also I was becoming more and more interested in the potential of motion graphics and After Effects and sound editing and editing to music, directing music videos and stuff. And Design Republic is still an incredibly good kind of print graphic design typography studio, which I love, and I've done so much print design I've never really shown anyone, which I should.
Unlike some studios and artists, you've deliberately chosen to stay small. You've deliberately chosen to say no, and you've deliberately chosen to stay outside of a big urban environment. And I wonder, firstly, can you just talk a little bit about why saying no has been really important to your practice?
Yeah, I think it's Steve Jobs or someone said you're defined by what you say no to, like how to strip out stuff from your products and just really focus on the core thing that you can do uniquely. I think, so yeah, staying small and saying no. I think essentially it's partially to do with living in Sheffield and wanting to stay in Sheffield because of the family and the kind of relative tranquility of the place. But yeah, I would say the band analogy is a way of kind of how do you grow as a band? Like we never really had the ambition to grow a huge studio with lots of responsibilities and having to take on a load of crap work just to keep everyone paid. I'd much rather that every single project we do, we're like super proud to show everyone. And there's no like secret, corporate stuff that we do to sort of bankroll the fun stuff. So that was one thing. But how to grow as a band, it's more about, as a band, you are more selective about the gigs you do and you choose better venues, you spend more time recording an album, you invest more time in yourself. So that was definitely the way we wanted to go and sort of put that ethos in place to resist accidentally growing into a much bigger studio. Like we've had people approach us before to like buy the studio, the kind of design side and, to partner with go into partnership with much bigger agencies like Pentagram and stuff like that, which is super flattering, but it just validated the fact that we were doing something right and how if we just stay small and super selective, then we'll all release work that we're all super proud of and not ashamed to admit,
An example I think that really stuck with me of like why no was important is we were getting a lot of attention from Los Angeles with a lot of possibilities and opportunities. And I just remember you going, I don't want to live like this. Like the implications were not about the work as much. It was about suddenly having everyone else's, I'll say corporate or a lot of zeros level of expectations on behavior, not on the work. And, you've got to be here then, and then you've got to do that. And I remember you saying to me, I'm not interested in people telling me where I have to be or what I have to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's something really nice about the freedom.
Yeah.
Being in control of your calendar, quite simply, and what you want to do. And I think the other thing that's super important to me is like the best thinking probably applies to most people. The best thinking and the best work and the best ideas come out of having like a spacious clarity in your mind and feeling relaxed and not stressed and not rushing around. So I'm always doing whatever I can to preserve that environment and almost not think about stuff too often. So you just that space and time and, not doing all-nighters and not running 7 projects at once. But I do have that tendency, but because I understand the kind of overactive mind thing, it's preserving that clarity is really important. And, people expecting you to go to LA all the time just doesn't fit with that.
Well, I think if I think about other people coming up or people wanting to build their own practice in whatever form, whether it's art or design, I think what you've identified is the actual hardest thing to be disciplined of is because if you don't say no, then you are like, people talk about that, you're always just on the grind. And it's like, well, that's the hardest thing to do is actually stay focused on keeping your imagination and your head clear to actually make stuff.
Yeah, because ultimately that is the output of the studio is good ideas, good aesthetics, good audience interactions, that's it. Everything else is just a byproduct really. And I could have quite easily, and I nearly did go down the path of speaking at all the conferences and flying around the world, meeting clients and doing all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the output that's important. And I just decided I'd rather put my energy into the output rather than the kind of peripheral stuff.
That's a good point around the output, because I remember noticing about 10 years ago, you know, on your website, it says self-initiated art. And I'm sort of interested in why you've chosen to say self-initiated. But actually, earlier, you know, a few years ago, it was being called prototypes. But the very fact that you put work out into the world and you just choose your website as one vehicle to put it out. But I noticed about 10 years ago that you'd created the bandwidth to not just launch projects, but to put things out that you wanted to make that were not made. Has that worked out for you? Like, because I'm really interested in the bravery to not worry about it being finished and just go, I want to make this.
Yeah, I think it comes down to this kind of, it's like a symbiotic relationship between commissioners and clients that we work with who are, you know, funding things versus us then wanting to make our own things to learn more and to generate kind of a buzz around a new thing that we're doing that may then sort of feed into that cycle again. Like I mentioned, like attract like earlier, like attracts like, and it's this idea of we'd love to be doing more stuff around motion capture or crowd simulation or multi-projector immersive things. You know, let's make something like that, you know, with complete freedom, and then see what comes out of it. And what's happened is we've kind of, through that process of making self-initiated work, and we say prototypes in terms of they're like seeds of ideas that could be expanded further, either by a museum or an exhibition piece, or even by a client collaboration or something like that. But it's getting those kind of seeds out there kind of helps to keep the studio fresh and the output fresh, rather than commissioners who come saying, oh, you know, that thing you did, can we have another one of those, please? And we're always trying to escape that kind of being typecast, essentially.
Well, there's something about when you watch the linear procession of something, and then you start to look for the differences, not the similarities. And I think what I'm seeing in your most recent work is that expansion of creature-like enjoyment, and that it's fun and it doesn't take itself too seriously. Whereas with some of your work in health, you know, or energy, you know, energy saving things, it's like you don't shy away from your values. Or so I think there's a way, maybe you can talk about this a little bit, is just because something looks aesthetically pleasing or could be cute doesn't mean there isn't an underlying, you know, message to that. And I think now you look back over 20 years, what would you say your manifesto kind of is telling you about yourself now? Not where you're going, but what's your past telling you about?
What's the thread that keeps re-emerging? I think it's definitely something to do with this soulfulness, using technology or just even anthropomorphic design. I think there's just something really interesting about using kind of soulfulness, cuteness, life as a way of connecting with the audience in terms of creating some empathy with people. So I think that's really interesting. And that's a kind of a hook that we use a lot in a lot of our work, even typography. You know, you look at the Beings logo, you know, that's it's a living piece of type. So I'd say that is the underlying thing that kind of works for us and connects us to the audience. I think when you talk about the processions, what's interesting there is that's kind of born out of generative design, where, you know, it was another tool we were playing with that was pretty high end when we started, and now it's become, you know, more accessible and gone crazy with the NFT thing, which is a different conversation altogether.
Yeah.
But we've been doing like generative iterations for like 15 years or something. And what's really interesting is when you're creating these living things generatively, you're creating these like surprises that you don't expect yourself.
Yeah.
You look at a procession, you're always wondering who or what is going to walk onto the screen next. And they might be limping or struggling or crawling or leaping. They might be like punks or people with grey hair or animals with massive perms or feathers or whatever. But I kind of love that idea of just applying some simple rules of nature, you know, kind of like the skin type, the limb type, the muscle type, all those things in a mathematical way, and outcome these kind of funny, cute, full of attitude life forms that walk across the screen. And even I or we as a studio don't know what's walking on the screen next. And there's something quite compelling about that. It's just a really simple kind of primal perception device of just watching life emerge that sort of somehow taps into this like really ancient historical feeling in everybody.
Well, you know, when we chatted last time, you said that you'd all been trying to think about a manifesto for the future to keep the studio like really tight and focused. And, you know, you'd managed to boil it down to life-affirming. And so when you've got a manifesto of make life-affirming work, what kind of avenues of work? Because I know you're exploring all kinds of not just museum work and artwork, but you're exploring more utilitarian approaches to what life-affirming is.
Yeah, I think life-affirming is a good way, you know, it encompasses everything from museum shows where it's like joyful and democratic, and it connects to families and kids as well as like high-end art people and all that. But it also is sort of related to life-affirming in the sense that it's design and even digital product design and experiences that are like helpful or beneficial as well. So it's not just kind of entertainment. Like one example is we've been working with this philosophy organization called the School of Life, and we've been making some films and some soundtracks with my brother for them around this idea of healing. And it's accompanied by a narrative, you know, a therapeutic narrative, but it's visuals which are very minimal but help you focus on sort of the stages of healing through trauma and things like that. And that's really interesting, where we're like reappropriating the skills we have as motion designers and digital artists and interactive designers into like helpful experiences as well. And another example is an app we're working with for a diagnostic tool for doctors and medical staff to use with a surgeon in London, which enables people to visualize pain symptoms over time on their body. So if it's a burning pain, then you can draw heat onto your body. Or if it's a sort of pins and needles type of pain, then you can draw pins and needles onto your body. So it's like a visual way of patients articulating the state and progress of their symptoms, you know, good or bad. It can be used for, you know, gym users as well as people who are suffering.
Is there any route that you kind of look at and go, I want more of that? Like, what would you like more of? What would you like to do more of?
It's kind of hard to say because we're kind of pretty content. I think we're in a...
That's great, though.
Yeah, that's quite a good question, because like I do a lot of planning and a lot of wishing of what we'd like to do more of. I'd love to do more stuff with education. I was looking at a playground designer studio called Monstrum, and they do these incredible playgrounds that are very figurative, like big whales and giants and that, made of wood that the kids can climb through and slide down the whale. And I love the idea of like doing work which engages everyday people more. So it's just
in
like,
their everyday lives, not having to cross the threshold of an institution.
Yeah, it's just like public work like that. And then the other thing we've been looking at, which I think is important and something we've been exploring a lot, is creating like physical sort of pavilion type experiences that don't use any energy. as well. So we've been or minimal amount of energy. So we've been looking at kind of wind and solar powered kind of immersive experiences, which, you know, almost amplify the wind around you or the daylight or the sunlight stream.
What makes someone a universal everything someone?
Well, they must have to like fur and color. No, no. I think it's just that balance between the kind of inventiveness and kind of appreciation of technology can be really playful. You know, it's not like tech demo stuff. It's not like serious geometry or anything like that. It's very much like the playfulness and also a lot of people have kind of got kids, and they're involved in a lot of family stuff outside of their lives. So they're not necessarily from the really serious design and fine art world or anything like that. It's definitely kind of everyday people. So I think that helps. And then the other thing is just having a kind of, I guess, more of a graphic design aesthetic sensibility. You know, there's a kind of certain appreciation of, you know, minimalism and restraint, and I guess most importantly, like really simplistic communication, you know, and that's what graphic design and commercial backgrounds and advertising backgrounds in a way do, is it's like you get the idea straight to the heart of people. And that's the kind of work we do.
I remember you've also made a lot of drawing type ones where people can draw themselves. So one of your earlier drawing pieces was at the Science Museum.
1,000 Hands.
Yeah, that's right. And we debated about the crudity of the drawing. And again, what kind of gave you that confidence that just such a crude line could deliver something really interesting?
Yeah, well, firstly, I really like the idea of involving the audience to create these like collective interactions. I think there's something really special about any member of the public coming in and drawing something. Even if they can't draw, there's no intimidation. You don't have to draw something good, but you know, drawing a crude line on 1,000 Hands, and then that line is recognized and embellished into a more ornate life form that then becomes part of the exhibition. And with gliders, again, it was stylizing your paper plane glider and coloring it and then launching it to a kind of collective flock of gliders that the rest of the public had made. But I just like that idea of it being so intuitive that it's literally draw a squiggle on the touch screen and it will become something beautiful. You know, the fewer instructions, the better, the more intuitive it is.
Yeah.
The better. Absolutely. Yeah, because otherwise it's a barrier to engagement, really. You know, it just needs to be as simple and relatable as anything in real life, like picking up a stick of chalk or something and drawing on the pavement.
Wow. I'm grateful that we get to do a show with you. And
yeah, it's great. No, we love it. I'd say shows are about a third, research a third, and self-initiated is a third, and just to break the rules of maths, the other third is client commissions.
But in 10 years, you'll still be making work and you will still have universal everything. I don't see you stopping.
In some form.
I don't
know how, but I'm excited to see what happens. I'm not scared, you know, that's the main thing.
Thank you, Matt. It's such a pleasure to be part of your creative and artistic journey.
Yeah, thanks for your support. No, I appreciate it. Yeah.
We'll see where we are in 10 years.
Yeah. See you soon.
Take care.